I'm so glad you guys are willing to take some time and happy to take some time to think about your own careers, because I think it's really important. At least once a year, now's a great time because it's the beginning of the year to reflect on, where you are, where you want to get to, and, are you happy with the way things are shaping up? Because things do change. I've called this navigating data careers. I presented this, and so apologies around the date. I presented this at a data conference, but when Romy and I were talking about it, and I'm mentoring Lauren Dally, talked to her about it a little bit, and all the ideas are relevant to many, many tech careers. So we will really focus on tech careers. So frankly, just ignore this whole page. The date's wrong, the title's wrong. But let me introduce myself just a little bit further. Romy did a great job of bringing to life the fact that I'm really a person. I've been doing things related to data for about 30 years. I've had about 14 different roles. I think you could call me a serial job switcher. For me, the excitement and, being in my 50s and having worked so long, I know the excitement for me is having something new, a new problem to solve. I think the thing that I'd love all of you guys to do is to understand what it is that gets you excited about roles. Because there are many people who keep a job longer than 2 years. That's not me, but it's an important thing to think about. It's also important that the career path for someone who's interested in data and technology at this point has never been more interesting, but it's also been never less clear. I think career paths are changing really significantly. When I started, there was really a prescribed, you did this, then you became a manager, and that kind of a thing. But now things are much more flexible. Job moves don't go straight up; they go squiggly. They go, and they will ebb and flow based on what's happening in your personal life, planned or unplanned. There are just more options today, and there's also so much more change. Things change so quickly that career paths and career roles that didn't exist a year ago are all over the job ads. I'll use AI as an example because Scotia has to use AI as an example. But before ChatGPT was released to the mainstream, people didn't really think of AI as a career unless you were really super technical, heads down. Now people understand this can be a career in a lot of different ways. So how to meet this head on? Just love to spend a little bit of time today talking about about what you're good at, how you want to use those skills, and where you'd like to use those skills. When I say if you don't feel like talking about yourself, just spending some time reflecting is really useful, I know too. So if that's the way you'd like to take things on, that's great. So let's move into this idea of what a career is. So I mentioned I've been working for about 30 years. So when I started at Accenture back in, I think it was 1989. So you signed up for this path. You were a programmer, and then you managed programmers, and then you sold programming work to companies. So that was the career path, and it was a pyramid. So a lot of questions you guys probably have now, which is, what happens to people who don't go up? And what happens to people who don't have those three specific skill sets? Because that's a unicorn. Those are three entirely different sets of skills. Managing, selling, and programming are not the same thing. You'll be glad to know Accenture doesn't use that model anymore at all. But back in the olden days, 30 years ago, that was what a career path looked like. I think another important thing to consider is you just don't know what life's going to serve you. I didn't plan to move to the UK. That was never on my career path. I'm American. You probably got that from my accent. And I met a person who was British who I want to spend the rest of my life with, and we then negotiated moving to the UK, but that was never on the plan. And you also don't know what the options are going to be. While I was interested in data from a fairly early age, college, 18 or 19, data as a career path just didn't exist. And the same thing will apply to anything across the technology spectrum. That the role of CIO, for example, we're under the auspices of next CIO, but CIO didn't exist until about 10 years ago. And I'd argue, and I think you guys have probably talked about the fact that CIO is a million different things right now. It's a CTO, it's a CDO, it's a CDAO. It's not a specific role. So this graphic represents what a career used to look like. That's the Accenture thing where you kind of did the same thing and just got kind of darker yellow as you went. My careers look more like this, and I've just kind of outlined the different types of things I've done in different colors. And and then 60 and 65 I haven't done yet, so I'll fill you in later. But I'd love to see a world in which we get to careers that look like this, where you can do like a bright green and do a completely different career for a couple of years, go say work in a school if your kids are in school or something like that. I'd love to see this more commonly accepted. So the good part of the old path is you knew where you were all the time. I mean, back in this Accenture, you knew if you were on the pyramid because they told you every year whether you're going up the pyramid or whether you were out. We don't have that benefit, but we have all the other benefits that go with we can figure it out. But then the onus becomes on us to figure it out. So that's where I come to today. This new world, people like all of us on this call and others want variety, flexibility, purpose. You want options at every stage. That's the other thing, since you don't know what's going to happen. You want like the options. And we also want to move at our own pace. So some points in your career, you're ready to accelerate. Some points you just want to take a pause. Maybe, I mean, a lot of my friends have older parents, for example, and they want to keep the career going, still work, but aren't after that really rapid promotion because they want to, spend some time with their parents. So critical here is understanding where your skills are, what you enjoy doing, what types of roles in the organization you want, what are attractive, and then equally importantly, what type of organization do you want to wrap that up in? I think we sometimes forget that. Sometimes forget that being a CIO, CDO, CTO at one place versus another place. And I'll contrast the CDO role I had at my last place and the one I've just taken up. The organization is entirely different. And while the content's not different, the work is so much different. So I want all of us to think today about these three things: skills, role, organization. I haven't seen any questions yet. Does anybody have any questions, or should we delve into skills? Okay, I'm going to delve into skills then. So skills in data and analytics, and I think you can see this also applies to everything across kind of the CIO spectrum, data, technology, adjacent things. I built a funnel because I see it as a funnel, but we could probably spend a whole day on this page. Maybe it's not a funnel, maybe it's kind of an octagon or something, but these are the different types of things, different types of skills. What I'm calling fundamentals is, this kind of idea around research, identifying and storing data, or identifying and understanding issues in a technology landscape. And how do you structure that? How do you take what you've done the research for and build it into some sort of structure? And that's a problem-solving type skill. There's a lot of skills around governance. There's cybersecurity, there's data governance specifically. There is everything around information security, much more broadly. There's a lot of governance needed. There's a technical design authority. So this is a skill that's all about understanding safety, security, project program management. There's specifics to technology. So from a data perspective, it's where we store the data. But from a technology perspective, it's understanding the hardware and software needed to solve the problems of the organization. So you've understood what they are, you've structured them, you've understood how we're going to keep them safe, keep them governed, keep them in structure, how we're going to deliver them. And then the next two steps have to do with taking what you've discovered and interfacing directly with the users of the technology, of the data. So there's a translation. This translation skill is entirely different than the skills you look at in, say, governance or in structuring. Some technical skills, there's problem solving. In delivery, it's all about stakeholder. So for data, you translate data for end users. Technology, there are many, many analogous things you can do. And then the very pointy end is actually being a user or enabling the insight and strategy through being a user. And that generally is someone who leads an organization. So while this is fairly data specific, I think you can see that each step of any sort of the technology realm requires problem solving at places. It requires safety, security. It requires program management. It requires research. It requires broad thinking. It requires strategy. And that's different. And we're all good at different things. Now, I think we'd all think of, like, when I had a CDO role, I had to understand all of these things. But the truth is, my strengths lie in the bottom of this, in the kind of light blue and yellow piece of it. That's the piece I love. That's the piece that gets me up in the morning. That's why I like to do what I do. But so in a higher level role, you just have to understand a little bit about each of the other boxes and the priorities of the people in those boxes and how to relate to people in those boxes. But the truth is, each of you know, you've got specific skills in some part of the organization. The other thing I've found, and this is interesting, I went to business school, and I only say that to say everyone goes to business school wanting to change their career. And the number of people I went to school with who've now gone back to their original career, including myself. So I started in data programming, really just like bits and bytes. I went through strategy, I went through all sorts of things, and I really find that fundamentally the thing I love is the thing I started with. I have a friend who does hotel and restaurant management. He went to business school, he ran for Expedia, he ran their programs around the digital solutions around restaurant and it was hotel demand management, so without boring you guys. So, and now he's come back full circle. So I think one of the biggest clues is, where did you start your career? What were the first things that attracted you into the work world? And also, what are the things that get you up in the morning now? So while you're thinking about that, oh, Mark, yes. I think you're on mute. There you are.
I used to Microsoft Teams. When I use Zoom, I get a bit lost. So apologies for that. It's really interesting in terms of the skills and how you mentioned over time. I guess my thinking here is that over time, in my own personal view, I'm going from a technical background and then looking to move more through. But I guess it's how did you prevent yourself from getting too deep into the one that really floats your boat, as it were? So you've mentioned obviously that enabling insight and strategy, which obviously is key to a lot of these things. But if, for example, technology was really your or governance was your real area of interest, how do you prevent yourself from getting deep into that one and therefore prevent you looking at the others? How have you managed that through your career?
It's a totally relevant question because you're right. When I get, in fact, literally the hour before talking to you guys, I had a discussion about data warehouse priorities, which is the kind of stuff I really love. And the people who are actually doing that work don't really want me deep in their noodles, right? It's their noodles. So I usually just declare my interest. I start out and say, this is the stuff I really love. So, you're going to just have to stop me because I am going to have an opinion. And I think the biggest thing you've done though, Mark, is this realization of the things that there are things that you love and you love to do, and it's just not going to change. I think that's the important thing too. Is I know that I'm never going to get away from really. I just love to do a little bit of visualization.
Mm.
That's just me. That's not going to change. So declaring an interest and then stopping yourself from having
Yeah.
too much involvement. Reminding yourself that, for example, my role in the conversation earlier today was really prioritization. So that's where I'm allowed to weigh in. But I think it's just natural. There are things you're just really naturally drawn to.
Yeah. True.
So just I think you just got to ride that wave. Any other questions, gang? Carolina?
I have a quick question, Megan. So it's really interesting. Thank you for sharing how you started your career. So, how you mentioned you're really passionate about the delivery and the users space. So I think it's somehow related to Mark's question as well, in the sense of, let's say I look as well into the product management side of things. So how do you actually know which path to go towards, and how do you actually don't get into the deeps of delivery, right? Because it can get very, very detailed. And then if you're trying to get more of a holistic view, and as you start to work towards the CIO or progressing CPO, for instance, or one of those routes, and how do you actually make that transition?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. It is related because as a CDO, all of these need to be familiar. I need to be able to talk about all of them. And we already talked about the fact that the bottom two, I'm good. I don't need any additional learning. For me, the hardest, and then I have a natural affinity to governance as well. So I did a lot of reading up. So maybe in three blobs. One, the stuff I already knew. I guess let's step back one. Understanding everything I needed to be responsible for, which is this whole list here. 2, what are the things I already know? For me, delivery users. 2, what are the things I kind of get and I need to know more about? Governance. That was just a little bit of reading up, talking to people. That's, a slight next, just bumping up my governance. Did a little bit of Gartner reading, did a little bit of talking to people. But then the other ones, particularly structuring and technology on this list, were, I don't want to call them weaknesses, I want to call them areas I didn't know enough about. And there I actually partnered with somebody in the organization who was the expert in that. So making sure I had the right stakeholder and just going to them and saying, look, my job now means I have to solve for hardware and software issues. And I do not know anything but Power BI. So tell me what I need to know, and help me understand. So Caroline, I expect you're probably the same if you're looking, let's say you're looking at a chief product role or something like that. You've got really deep in some part of it. And you just need to understand what belongs in the team. I think, have we talked about T-shaped leadership with this this group? Most leaders are T-shaped, and that's exactly what we're talking about here, which is the top of the T is all the pieces. So I've got it sideways. So just turn it sideways. The top of the T is everything you're responsible for. So as an example, when I was CDO at my last role, I had data governance reporting to me, check. I had insight reporting to me, check. I had the data scientists, that was new, exciting but new. And I had what's called data engineering. So, those two. So you are unlikely to be an expert in everything that reports to you. In fact, that would probably mean you've been doing too much to get there, right? So you're going to be deep in something. Mark, that was your great question about how do you not stay deep in it? How do you make sure you're coming up to the top? And then it's just making sure you understand all this. But I think you're able to say you're not, I come to this role with a deep understanding of X and Y, but I've got some learning to do in A and B. Because it'd be an absolute miracle if you, as you move down your career, knew every single thing in a particular role. And frankly, it'd be boring for you. So I don't think you'd want to take a new role where you already knew all of it. So
Thank you. Yes.
There's a question from someone who I can't tell what your name is.
Hello, sorry, it's Simon.
Oh, hi, Simon.
Hello, Megan. Thanks for sharing with us today. Yeah, I had a question on the T-shaped individual, which I completely recognise. One of the feedback from my vice president of transformation, who leads technology with the CIO reporting into her, is that I'm a T-shaped person, but my specialism isn't what the modern CIO is looking for. So my specialism is kind of infrastructure and service. And that modern CIOs, their specialism should be coming from an engineering background. And I wanted to get your view on what you see kind of in the market. Is that just maybe the type of organization that I should be thinking at, one that's kind of maybe more kind of service and user centric rather than kind of engineering and technical?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. It's that third piece we haven't talked about yet with the organization wrapping around your role and skills. You might just be in an organization that doesn't speak to your skills, because I would argue that service is absolutely critical everywhere I've worked, and a CIO would want to be service oriented. It's a great specialism. And the question for you is that what gets you going? Is that what you're really, if that's what you're, if you're not excited about it, then drop it and move on. If you are excited about it, find an organization that appreciates that piece of it.
It was the interesting comment was that most organizations and CIOs are tending to come from an engineering background as kind of everything kind of developing was her feedback. And I wanted to get your view on what you're seeing in the market as well. Are you seeing that there's a higher trend of CIOs coming from engineering technology focused backgrounds to kind of maybe Mark's point before, or is it more just targeting the right organization?
Now, remembering that my focus has been financial services, and when O2 is obviously a deeply service-related organization, and I now work for Alzheimer's Society. I'm the interim head at Alzheimer's Society, which is obviously a service organization. So I don't think that's true in my experience. Do I live in a little slice? Maybe I live in a little slice. I don't think I do, but that's because we all have our own little blinders on, don't we? I'm sure it's true that in your type of organization, the successful CIO comes from an engineering background per your manager's comments. So that's definitely, it's got to be true. She's got a good view of that. But I'm not, I wouldn't, no, I wouldn't say that's what I see as a trend. In fact, if I'm honest, what I see as a trend that CIO doesn't exist anymore. It's a little bit more specialist than that because it's so broad. I'm seeing CIO, if you think of that as chief information officer, CIO can also be chief investment officer, because I've been working in banks, so it's confusing. But a chief information officer is really evolving to me to be a chief data and analytics officer. Now, this is, it's going to be different everywhere you work. I do have a slide on that later, because when I was looking for a job, I was trying to go out there and just search for things. I was looking for organizations that I might want to work for. I was looking through my list of contacts. I was looking, I was also just looking straight up on job boards to say, this is the type of organization I want to work for. And every organization is slightly different when it comes to information, data, and technology. And I found it really hard to decipher. But I'll skip to the end, the slide we haven't seen yet. But essentially what I found is unpicking someone's organizational structure, especially at the C level, is absolutely critical to understanding what the priorities are for an organization. So yeah, so I think you've kind of answered your own question, to be honest, Simon, because it's different organizations prioritize these things differently. And if, what gets you up in the morning is the one you want to work for. If that's your place, awesome. If it's not your place, then you're only young and you'll find the right place, or, keep
I'm not
learning.
young, but thank you.
Everyone's young to me these days. I actually was talking yesterday about starting COBOL programming in 1989, and two of the people in the room hadn't been born then. So I had to take a minute to sit down. Romeo, do you have a question?
I mean, I was just sort of like thinking, like, to add to that point that you guys were talking about as well, and whether some of those pieces that Simon mentioned was related to like how do you differentiate between like a CIO and the CTO as well to some degree in terms of the career paths. But I mean, you guys sort of digged into it a bit deeper anyway. But I mean, just to add on that from what I have seen as well, like people with network infrastructure skills got into being a CIO. So I think that's frankly just very much dependent on the organization itself. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's, but I mean, just a question to actually have a question in there as well, like where do you see the difference then between like a CIO, CTO type of role, and I guess how would you sort of, I know it's pretty gray, especially now where it's going, but how would one even try to sort of differentiate whether that's sort of your career path versus a CIO?
So get hold of the org chart. So I'll give you an example. My last place, we had a CEO, a chief operating officer, and the CTO, CDO, that was me, both reported to him.
Right.
So that tells you everything you need to know about the priority. You also know that I left that organization. So you may draw whatever conclusion you like from that. Other places where, when I worked at Virgin, actually, they reorganized and they had a CIO, an information officer, a CTO, and a chief digital officer all reporting to the CEO. Now you can see how the priority, it's obvious how different that priority is. Then you just see what reports that, just at that, you only need to go down a couple of levels. But if you can see what the functions are, I think that says a lot about the organization. And how recently did they reorg for that is another question I normally ask.
Like, I guess just to like on that point, like you're basically talking about like whether an organization is focused on cost optimization or cost cutting, or you're basically creating a cost center function rather than actually technology being the investment sort of priority.
It is about, yeah, I mean, I think that is exactly it. Like I'll say for Virgin, you could see separating out digital said that's where we're going to invest this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the technology, if you saw it was underneath, it was basically keeping everything running in the background so people will still make phone calls, which is really important. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, great discussion on skills. So let's talk a little bit about org, because I think this is one that, at least for me, was something I needed to do more of earlier in my career, and I didn't. So here we are. So forgetting the skills for a second in your kind of hard skills, let's talk about the soft skills. There are a lot of soft skills I haven't named here, resilience, for example. So there are a lot of skills one needs to develop. But in terms of leading, I'll argue to you guys, and again, we could spend an hour on this page alone, but these are the 6 areas in which you need to think about your leadership style, what you like to do. What do you like to do? Do you like to have a broad vision or deep vision? So back to T-shape. That's actually broad is the top and deep is the T. How do you like to influence? Do you really like to have, are you the person who likes to go and speak to big groups of people and talk about your vision and how great it is? Or do you prefer to have a really focused view on like AI is one example these days? In terms of people management, the third one on the list, do you like to mentor people or do you actually like to partner with them? So do you like to lead them day to day? Do you like to just kind of influence informally? In terms of your delivery, actually, do you like to deliver lots of things? Is that a lot of people really, especially people who tend to have PM program management credentials, love to deliver stuff. They get a real charge out of getting stuff done. So do you want to do lots of specific delivery? Do you want to do lots of delivery? Do you want to just do broad? Do you want to be in charge of people delivering? Do you want to, have a higher level role that just says, here are the things we need to deliver and monitor people delivering them? In terms of problem solving, a lot of us are problem solvers innately. Do you like to look at broad problems? Do you like to look deeply into problems and really put your head down and solve? I'll be honest with you guys, I like deep on this one. And then technical skills, this is exactly the discussion we had, so we don't need to have it again. This is a T-shaped thing. Do you have lots of, kind of shallow skills in a bunch of different technologies, a bunch of different other disciplines, or do you have really deep, do you have a data science degree and you've been doing data science for 10 years? So I'll just give you guys a second to think about yourself because each one of us is going to be different on this. And it has to do with current skills and future skills, but starting with kind of current skills, where do you think you are on these things just in your head? And then what we'll do is we'll just flip over to talk about at least there are at least three types of roles that folks like us would like to have in an organization. Correlating them with these, I think, at least for me, is really revelatory, both on what I needed to change or improve or strengthen, but also on where my preferences lie. So from the top of the org chart, C-level director, depending on the size of the organization, someone toward the top of the org chart, I'd say you need to have or to be able to get to this. And again, we can argue this, but to be at the top level of the organization, you do need to have some vision. You need to be good at broad influencing. You need to influence a lot of people. People management, you don't actually have to be great at people management. Controversial, but true. I know a number of C-level folks who are terrible at it, to be honest, because you're really more judged on influence and vision. You need to be pretty decent at delivery, or at least getting stuff delivered. Broad problem solving as opposed to narrow, as opposed to deep. And your technical skills, that can be anywhere on this for a C-level person. So, if your aspiration is C-level, it's a good question of where you see yourself on this. I'll also say when I went from a head of to a CDO level, it's a really big shift. Because I was on the top one, my preference is broad anyhow. So that was good, but my influencing skills, if I'm honest with you guys, weren't where they needed to be. I'd been managing people for so long that I went in thinking that was all about managing people. It really isn't. And problem solving, I'm actually really deep on that one personally. That's actually just never going to change. I've accepted. But I think it's really important to think about where you are, what you want to do, where you want to be. And I think the other thing is a little bit like the Accenture example. Middle managers and at big organizations, a middle manager is pretty senior. These are the skills that you really are evaluated on. People management, delivering a lot of crap. Not crap. Delivering a lot of things quickly that are not crap. Technical skills, this is that T-shaped thing we talked about, you probably have a couple you're deep in, but you're trending more toward having these shallow skills. So you're expected to go from that, I'll go back to the page before, quickly. You can see how the arrows are moving. So worth thinking about. The other thing is worth thinking about is what are you comfortable with? It's a very individual answer. And I actually really like to manage people. I've actually ended up, I'm closer to this model now than this one. This is my last job was more like this, and I'm not. Since I work for a charity, it's kind of it's a kind of a weird entity, but it's because I like managing people, and a lot of people don't. In fact, most of my team, we had an away day yesterday. Most of my team don't like managing people, so it's an interesting challenge I have to deal with in the upcoming months. But important to think about this. Important to think about what you like. It's your answer. And do you really want to shift this much and go to the top of the org chart? Some of you guys are going to be a hard yes on that. Some of you are going to be thinking, well, maybe there's something in between. There's actually a third model, which some of you may have worn as a hat. We may all end up with this as a hat, which is the expert contributor, the individual contributor, the expert contributor. Here you have a skill you're offering, a specific. So this goes back from when we were talking about T-shape. This goes back to your deep skill. And a lot of people nearing retirement, as I am, like you start thinking about what do I have I can offer as a consultant. So if you're consulting, particularly on a specific skill, you need to be more here. You need to influence the heck out of things. Your vision's only moderately important. It can be very deep for the thing you're doing, but for the whole organization, they're not interested in what you think about the organization. They're pulling you in to do one specific thing. So you can see I'll just run back through them, just 3 really different sets of things. So again, for me, I check back in with this regularly as well. Where do you want to be? Where are you now? What's the delta between the two? What do you need to develop? And also I'll say to you, if you're interviewing for, say, a C-level role, you want to be able to demonstrate from this page these things. You want to show your vision, your strategy, your influence. You don't really need to talk about managing people. Organizations do vary, so obviously your delivery and problem solving maybe a little, but if that makes sense, I hope that helps everyone think about how A, acknowledging these are very different things, B, if you want to move between them, you can see some of the things you need to develop, and then C, what do you naturally really love to do? And those are the things you're probably then going to want to think about doing those things. So pausing there. Any questions on that? Any thoughts on that?
If I can just, hi Megan, it's Mark again, sorry. It's interesting how the technical skills, I was quite surprised at the top of the org chart how deep the technical skills were. I was expecting them, following on the conversation we had earlier about trying to not get involved. I guess you would, as a result of not getting involved, your technicals would probably erode a little bit and you'd probably be a little bit behind the time. So I guess that's quite an interesting, how it's above more than like halfway kind of thing.
And it's a really good challenge because, to be honest, this one's the one to be the most variable at the top of the heap. I think when I was this is my model entirely, so all errors are mine too. The thinking there is that what you're expected to be at a C-level conversation is the expert in, if you're the chief data officer, everything around data.
Okay.
So to be honest, now that we've talked about it, it really is more of the whole T. So I don't know where the arrow goes then. Maybe I don't know. But does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So hopefully that's what I'm. So it's a great
yeah.
question to get at that, because then for this one, I do mean actually a very deep, because when you're a consultant, when you're coming in and you're being paid, 1,200 quid a day, they're hiring you for something really specific.
Yes.
So you need to be super deep and super good at partnering and super good at keeping out of the high level strategy. That is from experience.
So when we were talking earlier around, because it's quite interesting, Simon's question around the technicals, obviously that's very much where I'm from. Working in health, I've developed more of that wider end user passion and then end user clinician perspective as well, because that's key to us. And that's how I've tried to soften the technical side by getting very much involved in the applications and in the integration, which has helped me then expose me to a lot of the other areas. But I guess that just bring into the excellent question around, well, actually being technically infrastructure and the future CIOs looking elsewhere, whereas actually what you was responding back on this probably re-emphasize that actually you may find a role which is a CTO, which is a technical opper, and therefore those skill sets are very much required, whereas a CDAO or even a CIO, maybe the CIO technical skills are more across many different areas, including infrastructure. So it's finding the one what suits you as a person, I guess, as well as your ambition.
Not quite right. Sometimes it's a needle in a haystack too. It's not
It is.
always easy. Carolina, what's your question?
Yeah, just to add to Mark's remarks, I found it interesting how you mentioned the people management side, because I would have thought at the top, I don't know if you mean with influence that you have to have a lot of stakeholder management, right? And is
Yes.
that different from the people management? And I guess from looking at from a CIO perspective, not only on the technical skills, but on that successful delivery towards transition to service or the other people management, is that also relevant to that? That's kind of the difference that I wanted to make or ask about.
Yeah, on the first bit, I would have that stakeholder thing absolutely critical, and I would call that influence on my way of thinking about it. You can take that or leave it. People management, to me, a CEO only manages 4 or 5 people usually, right? So there's some people management, but you're not managing all the people. You're just managing those few people. So it's not really, it is part of your job, but it's not the most important part of your job. Yeah.
So it's your direct reports, basically, that people
That's right. You're
manage.
managing your direct reports, and then you have to trust them to manage their,
Okay.
my friend who's a CDAO at a really big organization has like 700 people reporting to him. He doesn't know all their names, I've got 35. I do actually know everyone's name, although I don't have all their surnames yet. It's really different.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sunisa, do you have a question?
Yeah. Hello, Megan. Yes.
No.
Yeah. In my organization, I belong in the data space, but for the reporting needs of the organization, and then there is a separate department for data analytics, and then there are different how we are structured, as in like we have a for each application, like finance applications and transport. I belong to a logistics company or transport domain. There are several applications, so it's all like the verticals are organized like this. And how do you see, for example, in terms of vision, you mentioned having a broader vision takes you to the top level of the org chart. But then in a company which is structured like this, how would you then see that I grow up in this organization structure?
So
Because
your
there
interest, go ahead. I was just gonna say your interest is data and analytics, but they've split data and analytics into the silos, it sounds like. Is that what we're seeing?
Yeah, so we have a reporting platform separately, and then there's analytics, which is
So it's
separate.
super split.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So what I'd say to you is your organization, I would argue, and they're not going to listen to me, just to be clear, that needs someone looking over the vision of that, because it doesn't sound like there is someone. And so
Well, there is CIO who oversees
CIO.
everything.
Okay. So if you want to grow into, if that's your target role, I would think the biggest challenge of that model would be getting everyone to talk to each other. So is there a way to get to know the CIO priorities and then understand how you might improve? So to me, if you're down in one of those silos, did we meet at one of the events? I think we did. If not, it doesn't matter. Anyhow, if you have a bunch of different silos, I would think that the best way to learn would be to find peers, either, I can't remember whether you were doing analytics or in the reporting platform, but to find your peers in those areas and understand what they're doing and how you can work better together, even though you're not actually working side by side, but sharing best practices, having an interest group. I did an interest group one place across a bunch of different reporting and insight disciplines, and we just met once a month and kind of frankly shared battle stories most of the time, but then also like, here's some cool insight we did.
Yep.
So
no, we do that actually.
Oh,
we
good.
do share.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And we know what each other is doing, the kind of stuff.
Right.
But to have a step up, you need to then kind of, your advisors then know the other areas, and then slowly start talking to your CIO about other areas too. and show your interest in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it'd be kind of switch, even getting a job. This, I think, as we're talking about squiggly career paths here, maybe you don't just go up, you kind of go sideways and get an expertise in another vertical.
Right.
Sounds like you've got an in for that already because you've already know what's going on there. You know, get 6 months to a year of that under your belt, and then you can say, look, I've got great vision, great view of at least 2 areas, and we talked to all these other folks, and I know what's going on in these other 3, 4 areas. I think you can make a really good argument then that you have a really good vision of what's happening in the organization. Cool. So I'll round it out by just talking about this idea. We talked about skills, we've talked about where on the org chart you want to be, and then this idea about organization, which we've already touched on a couple of times. So thanks for the good questions. Again, we've already talked about a number of things. Organizations have a different way of looking at the type of work that we all do, and we all do a slightly different thing. These 4 continuum bars talk about the type of companies. It's not about what they do. Yeah, also good to ask questions about what they do. But for me, a lot of the things I was looking for when I was changing roles had to do with this. Do you like a culture that's set or dynamic? And dynamic to me is chaotic. So for me, the purple triangles are actually me on here. I've done a personal review of this. I like the culture to be more set, and that is just me. I worked for a startup for a time. That did not work for me. I couldn't, no. Size, broad focused, and then we've just talked, Sunith, your example was about how large companies broken into silos as well. So that's more focused than broad. So is the company you'd like to work for, does it have a really broad brush across an entire area, whatever the thing is? We've talked about health, we've talked about manufacturing, lots of other things. Or do you prefer a focused organization? For me, I like a focus. I like to have more of a knowledge. I say that, and I'm working in Alzheimer's Society now, so that didn't actually work. But when I was working in financial services, I liked to be in one specific area. And then there's stability. We've already talked about culture, kind of set dynamic, but stability is about, is the company looking to change, or are they looking to kind of stay the same? And neither one is bad or wrong. Entrepreneurial tends to be, again, kind of more dynamic, more exciting, but equally there's a lot of influencing, there's a lot of backstabbing, there's a lot. Did you hear my bias? You heard my bias there, didn't you? Anyhow, this may be the thing that you really love. I do not love it. You can see my purple triangle there closer to stable. And then purpose. Now, purpose, I've done this is my getting older one, which is, and I've put aligned in broad, but what I really mean is it a purpose-driven company? Is a purpose that you are excited about? Or is it a company that does stuff that you're interested in learning the technical skills, the leadership skills? And neither one's wrong. At this point in my life, I'm really working for Alzheimer's Society because it's something that runs my family, really important to me. But at other points in my career, I've not even thought about that at all. I think the broader discussion we've had today as a group, though, is really important, which is the organization going to be compatible with the things that you want to do? Can you enjoy being there and getting some new skills? I don't think many of us are going to stay at the company we're at for more than 10 years, and certainly not in the same role. So it's not absolutely critical that every single thing about the company is perfect. But as you're looking to change roles, it is worth thinking about what kinds of companies am I going to be most successful in. And then I'll show you this. We already talked about this, which is, aligning the company's strategy to the way you want to think about things. And this would be a nightmarish company, but the point, which we've already touched on, is look at who reports to CEO. Is it a CTO, an IO, a DO, Chief Operating Officer? I won't read them all to you. You can read. And then below that, I've listed other incarnations of those same C roles I've seen out there. So asking yourself, is the company's organization compatible with the things I want to be doing and learning? Yeah, just get a hold of the org chart, see if you can find someone. Sometimes it's online, sometimes you can find someone who works there that you know. Oh, this is what I just said. So I think we'll end there and see if there's any more questions. Just reiterating the same points we've just made, which is this world means that you have to think more explicitly about your career. We used to have really prescribed career paths, doesn't exist anymore, and that's fine. But what it means is both an opportunity and a challenge for us to think about the skills we have, the ones we want to have, the ones we do have. What do we default to? The types of roles, the places in the organization we can use our skills. Where are we now? Where do we want to get to? What things we're really good at? And then which types of organizations do we want to do this for? That'll change over your lifetime. So I'll end there and see if there are any more questions. All right. I think that means everyone's ready for their lunch.
I have a quick question,
Oh,
sorry.
Carolyn, yeah, of course.
Just a quick one. I know that I think Romeo had a similar comment previously. So, in the difference of between a CIO and a CTO, is there anything that you think would help to kind of help us know which path to explore a bit more?
To me, they're actually pretty different. I think the CIO is more akin to a chief data and analytics person. And I actually think CIO is more exciting because it incorporates technology and data and analytics, whereas CTO to me is really specific to technology and technology solutions, and really important as well. So I think it does come back to the things that get you the most excited. I mean, we have such, what I'm seeing when I go out, when I was looking for a job not too long ago, there are a lot of roles out there for all of us. So we're in the lucky position of being able to be a little more, not fully selective. I mean, you can't just walk into any job, but you can really think about the job and the content. So I don't think you need to say you want to be a CTO or a CIO. I think you say you wanted to have a job that has these things within it. And I think that CIO is a little bit broader. To me, CTO is a little more narrow, but there are also versions of CTO that contain, in fact, my very good friend is a CTO, has the chief data officer reporting to him. So back to org. So Caroline, it's really, what are the things you really enjoy doing? And what are the things you think you'd be good at leading? I mean, what are things you have a passion for? If you go in with a passion for the cause, like for me, Alzheimer's Society, the cause is the thing that's driving me, and getting the data right for that, that gets me up in the morning. But for you, it's going to be some other combination of things. And so that's what I just like to urge all of you to think about after talking through these things, which is, what are you good at? What gets you excited? How are you best going to use those skills in an organization, to get the most out of it for you and for the org? Remember, it's a two-way thing, for you and the org.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Megan, if I could ask a question, one of the
Sure,
things
Simon.
in order to kind of get your next role is the acceptance that maybe you have to take on a role or be in an organization that may not be aligned to those things. So for example, for my next role, I'm expecting to go from a 5,000 seat business to a 1,000-seat business. If I want to become, if I want to get my CIO role, it's unlikely I'll be able to get it in a similar sized financial services organization, right?
Right. Yeah.
Have you got any advice on kind of navigating kind of the step down to the step up, or the step up, but then a step down in organizational size and salary? Because you might have to move out of, say, FS into retail or something,
or
where
into
there's
charity work.
or into charity work, indeed. Yeah, I mean, actually, once a CIO I used to work with went from insurance into the cancer research, right? And did it as did it mission based, but he was at a stage in his life where he didn't have to pay his mortgage like me. So I'd be interested to get your view on the step down to step up, or the step up to step up again.
I mean, it's a career path. So let's leave salary to the side for just a second. We'll come back to that. You're a great example of, you don't think you can go straight up to CIO in your 5,000 seat place. You need to do, that's a very natural thing to look more broadly at a smaller organization than build up your skills. So this kind of squiggly career path is absolutely sensible, as long as it's serving the things, you're playing a long game here. You're not Salary is a little bit harder. Now, the example you gave about your friend and for me also, taking a different salary to do the thing at this point in my life I really want to do. That would just, it made sense to me for those same reasons. It serves my ends. I too don't have a mortgage. So, we're still able to eat, which is really important. So that is a hard question because I don't think you should have to take a big, I wouldn't think you'd have to take a big salary cut if you're going sideways, unless, and I don't know where you are right now, Simon, but if you're going out of something like, I'm thinking of some of like the private equity type roles, and you probably will have to take a salary cut. So you're playing the long game. You know at what point you're uncomfortable salary wise. You have to have a short-term view of it then. I think that's the real problem for me is if you do that change, you probably have a short-term view of, and I've said I don't keep a job longer than 2 years. So, do that for 2 years, fine. You want to be able to make an argument to a recruiter that, you did it for good reasons because they're going to ask you. Why'd you take a salary cut? Because I want to get these skills because, but equally, I don't think in my experience, you have to take a huge salary cut. I've done salary equivalents to do one of those squiggly type moves you're talking about. Salary equivalents is okay. Because you're getting in, you've got a plan. So if you have a specific thing you want to talk about offline, just send me a message separately. I'm happy to help you try to navigate. I've
Thank
been
you.
somewhat
I've
successful.
got loads, and I've already added you on LinkedIn, so there we go.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I saw something flash over here, but that's what
Thank
that was.
you.
I'll respond. Yeah, because it's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, we talked very early in this conversation about sometimes there are things outside of your control, and flexibility is great. We talked about the positive side of it, right? You want to be able to go to school runs or take care of aging parents, or these things. But sometimes they do come at a little bit of a cost career-wise, that you don't have 100% of your time to give. And I've had times in my life I've given 100%, but then you don't have a life outside of work. And I think for each person, each point in life, you just have to decide what can work for you. And you always need to be able to eat. You do want to do that. Yeah, it's exciting though, isn't it? I mean, I really love this new landscape where we have so many possibilities, but it is harder. It's harder. You're really lucky to have your peer group in your next CIO crowd. The few of you I'm looking at, I've met some of the others as well, because they're probably in about the same headspace. So maybe even like, having a drink or a meal or some casual interface just to honestly just set the world to rights might be really helpful. Because I love that you guys
on
all
that
doing
note,
this.
there's
Yeah.
4 or 5 of us on the call who are going out for dinner tomorrow night. So I can see
Awesome.
Romeo, Carolina,
Good.
Chris. So I look forward to dinner tomorrow night.
Thank you for organizing it, Simon. Yeah, forward to it.
Good.
If you'd like to come, Megan, you're more than welcome.
Thank you. I won't do tomorrow, but I will
It
do.
means
I'd
you can
like
eat
to.
though.
Oh, well, I do like to eat.
Yeah.
Very circle now. No, we've got. I went to see some of your peers in a panel. That was really fun, and we had a drink after. I really enjoyed that. So all very good. You guys are very lucky, and just take as much advantage as you can of having each other as people to talk to. So absolutely amazing. So I think we'll end